This week's show brought to you by Mario Ellie, the most undeserved Finals MVP of all time. Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. We are coming down to the home stretch of the NBA Finals, and of course, that's what we'll be discussing. We've still got some more of the Game of Thrones versus NBA playoffs to discuss, and our injury reserve player, Patrick Minton, is back. So I'm your host, Dre Alvarez, a.k.a. Nerd Numbers. As I said, Patrick Minton, a.k.a. NBA Geek, is on. Patrick, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Thanks.
Yeah, so it's just been a crazy offseason, leg sickness, all that jazz, but glad to have you back. And then, as always, we are produced by our own voice of God, Brian Foster, a.k.a. Boxscore Brian on Twitter. Say hey, Brian.
Oh, what's up, Dre? And I'm so salty and fired up, just like last week. We're going to continue that on this show today.
I'm excited about this. Normally, Brian, as I call him, our voice of God, he also tends to be our voice of reason, and I tend to get all overly excited about stuff. But these playoffs, he's been worse. But let's start with a game that's been going on the last couple of weeks. Maybe the worst regular segment to add to the show, since it really only lasts when both the NBA playoffs and Game of Thrones are on, and one of those is going to end soon. But the game is, which was better this last week? The Game of Thrones episode, the last week was No One, or the NBA playoffs? I have my own opinions. Patrick, since you're just back, I'll let you take the first crack. NBA playoffs or Game of Thrones?
Well, given that, like Brian, I am a Golden State fan, I'm going to have to go with Game of Thrones.
Oh,
really? You're going to take Game of Thrones over? Oh, wow.
Because I'm sorry, I did not enjoy watching Cleveland undeservedly win.
All right. Well, that's rough because.
And I say undeservedly not because they weren't cheated or anything, but
we'll get to that later. Yeah,
we'll get to that. Yeah.
So, Brian, your take?
I'm going to give a slight edge to the NBA. I enjoyed this week's episode of Game of Thrones, not as much as last week, and we'll talk about that for a couple of minutes. But
wow.
The Warriors lost the NBA game, but still pretty close game, and even if there was some weird stuff happening, it was a heroic effort by
Am
Kyrie
I mistaken? What are you talking about, close game? Because wasn't it a blowout?
Oh, they won by like 12 or 13, but through the first 2 or 3 quarters is a little bit close. I'm just saying compared to the rest of the series where we've been seeing 20 and 30.
No, I mean, honestly, if I'm the coach, I'm thinking, let's see, our best players shot 4 for 17 on uncontested shots. Their best players shot 19 of 30 on contested shots. And we only lost by 10. And Draymond Green wasn't there. I'm thinking...
And Bogut.
We're fine.
So let's close out on Game of Thrones here first. So I'm showing an article here from AV Club, Miles McNutt. He's one of my favorite, pundits for Game of Thrones. And I feel like he summarized my thoughts on the episode very well. No One's a weird episode as the climaxes are inherently anticlimactic. Arya defeating the waif was predictable. River Run was undone by a quiet betrayal with the Blackfish's death off screen. I use air quotes here because he doesn't die in the book, so maybe he's still alive. And the Master's attack on Meereen both felt inevitable and oddly motivated. Yeah, I mean, Daenerys comes flying back on a dragon. So, yeah, I kind of agree with Miles McNutt here. What do you guys think about this episode overall?
I'll let you jump in first, Patrick. Since you liked it more than the playoffs, I actually hated this episode, but
You hated it?
Oh.
So
I hated it.
I loved all the banter between the Hound and the Brotherhood.
That's my favorite scene too.
That was good.
I thought that was great. I thought the Arya stuff was kind of predictable, but I mean, I it's fine. I'm excited to have her stop wasting time. I've always felt like Arya is one of my favorite characters, but I've always felt like her arc in Bravos is just her fucking wasting time for several seasons until it's time for her to go home, regardless of what would have happened there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll be that annoying person that says in the book, well, in the book, it feels like she actually learns skills and gets stuff. And something I did last week, this is on YouTube, is there is all of Arya's season 5 clips put together. So you can just watch her arc. It's 48 minutes long. I don't really feel she grew or learned. And looking at both the waif and Arya as kind of trained assassins, those scenes, I was like, you both suck at what you're like. The waif, I'm like, you're supposed to be a master of stealth and cunning, and you're running out in the open, not disguised, trying to kill this person.
Yeah, well, a couple things. Well, first of all, I think they make it fairly obvious that the waif is every bit as guilty as Arya in terms of not actually being no one, because it's very clear that she wants to kill Arya because she doesn't like Arya and not from some dispassionate service to the faceless god. So, I mean, I think there's an explanation to be said that she is like reckless and stupid when it comes to Arya, and that's why Arya was able to defeat her. Um, the other thing about all of Arya, and this was true, like if you go back to season one, like her learning has always been in like in the off screen, or at best in like Rocky style training montages, right? Like you don't actually see her progressing over the course of an episode or something. It's more like, oh, I mean, she's been practicing off screen with, her water dancing, and then later, oh, she was practicing off screen fighting blind with
Could they have
sticks.
done with her storyline what they did with Brands, which was like compress it down a little bit, cut some of that stuff out, and they cut out a lot of Blood Raven and Cold Hands in the series, so maybe Arya should have just been off screen a little bit more.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's the same problem as the book. Like Arya kind of is all over the place.
Just a boring storyline, huh?
I don't think it's a boring storyline because I think she's a great character, but
yeah, that's true.
But it's just random. It's all over the place. She just ends up everywhere.
And then, none of the conspiracies happen, right, Patrick? It didn't turn out that the waif was like a Fight Club alter ego of hers. That was one theory.
I never
turn out Jaqen was posing as her. It was just kind of the most expected end, right? She fought the waif, and then Jaqen was like, you defied me, but damn it, I respect you, Arya. And he just kind of nodded as she walked off, like. It was, okay. Here's one thing I'll say though. I thought the action scene, the chase, it was kind of a two-parter. That was really cool. I like that.
But see, yeah. so my complaint there, and my dog Moby is completely on board apparently. But my real complaint with that is it didn't have a place in it. I find that a lot of shows, TV, movies are guilty of this, where they go, we need an action beat here, so there needs to be a chase, but that doesn't fit the storyline. My personal edit that I told my brother I would have done of the show is just. Right after she leaves and Jacqueline says, I think I hope I said that right, says, she has many gifts, kill her, but don't make her suffer, that you just immediately cut. The next scene we see is just, the face, the waif's face hanging in the house, and Arya there was a badass scene. Had they cut out everything in between and then had everything else, I'd have been fine. So from my perspective, what's interesting, Patrick, what we just said back and forth with all the off scene, I think this was a case where they showed us a bunch of stuff, and if they'd left it off screen and let us imagine, it would have played way better than showing us, a horrible thing where I kind of felt Arya was very much like the Cleveland Cavaliers, tying it back to the NBA, where she won, but I didn't feel she earned it. I went, you got super freaking lucky, and a bunch of your contested shots went in, and a bunch of their uncontested shots didn't go out. You should be dead right now, and the Warriors should be celebrating their second NBA final.
I've got a tie-in too, Dre, between this episode and the NBA. You want me to bring it up right now? Are you ready to talk finals?
Let's do it. Let's do that, and we can move on to the finals.
Oh, I sense where this is going.
No, okay. On our NBA subreddit, a great source of dank memes, poster Mike Bibby 2 says Adam Silver is quickly becoming the Tommen Baratheon of the NBA. By suspending Draymond Green, he's trying to cut down the hype. And let me just close Game of Thrones by saying, Tommen Baratheon, I know you're listening to this show. I'm sure you do, like everyone else does. You cannot stop Clegane Bowl. The hype train continues. It is still 100% confirmed. You're going to get killed by Cersei's wildfire. Eat all the chickens. It's going to happen. Fucking confirmed Clegane Bowl. That's it. Let's move on to the NBA. Oh, we might have lost Dre, though. Too much hype for Dre.
My camera jostled for a second.
Oh, okay, good. We got him back.
All right, so NBA Finals. I mean, I think we've teased this a bunch already, Patrick, so I'm curious if you have any coaching perspective. That's what we kind of miss when you're around. Do you have anything to say about what happened? I do feel Game 5 just doesn't really count. With both Andrew Bogut and Draymond Green out, they didn't really have a front court. A bunch of lucky stuff went in. I mean, I don't, from an X's and O's standpoint, I don't really know how to classify Game 5.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Golden State shot really poorly on uncontested shots. Curry and Thompson both had a lot of pretty open looks that they missed. And Barnes, oh my gosh, he had so many open threes he missed. And then, the contested shots that Irving hit, a lot of them. I'm sorry, Cleveland. I'm sorry, but if you're hoping that's going to happen in the next two games, I don't think that's going to be sustainable. I
But
mean,
it
it's
is
ridiculous.
to throw this in. I mean, we've had this discussion about small sample size in finals. I mean, it's entirely possible that they get lucky for one or two more games, and that is the finals. That's one reason we kind of.
Yeah, but I wouldn't bet on it, right?
Oh,
I mean,
obviously not.
because you have to bet on Irving staying that lucky and on the Warriors staying that unlucky, and I wouldn't bet on that. I mean, if I don't know what the betting line is, but I wouldn't consider Cleveland the favorite tomorrow.
Just to back you up, Patrick,
Yeah,
we
I mean,
have this stat from.
it's kind of boring. I don't have much to add beyond that. I mean, what I will say is kind of interesting is LeBron James did put up a Finals MVP worthy performance, and
Totally.
one note I'll make about LeBron James, and I've had this in me before, talked a lot about this. He's traditionally never been that great in the finals, and I mean that's a little rough to say because
Especially after last year.
well, I mean, but don't forget, last year he's got this insane stat line, 30 some odd points or whatever, and kind of to me proved that the voters are never going to give a losing player the Finals MVP. But what I'll say about that is, look at his shooting efficiency. This is a guy that can put up 60%, 30 points on 60% true shooting and be a threat for a triple double every night. And last finals, even though he showed some greatness, he had a lot of, this is going to get me in trouble, a lot of weaknesses. And that's kind of been his MO throughout his career. And Brian's brought this up before. It's a small sample. We can't say much. But what I will say is, LeBron James is acting like a Finals MVP this season. We'll see if he gets there, and we're not betting on it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, since I don't think the Cavs are going to win it all, I don't think he'll be the MVP. I mean, my money right now is on Draymond Green, especially if they win Game 6. Because if you combine,
I love it.
if you combine his numbers and then you combine how they lost without him,
Interesting.
assume that his numbers come back in Game 6, he seems like the obvious choice for Finals MVP.
But do you think that he gets? Are there any issues with the one missing a game? Of course. Two, obviously, there is a lot of negative stigma about him. Although what I'll say is fascinating is he's the biggest villain in the NBA after he kicks Steven Adams in the conference finals, and then apparently if someone steps over you, it's cool to take a swing, which I thought was Charles Barkley was defending it. That's funny escalation to me. It's like this guy disrespects you, so it's cool to try and injure them.
So let's be fair. I honestly don't think. And this is weird because I'm okay. Let me back up. Pretty sure Green has on a couple of occasions tried to hit someone in the nuts, but ironically in this particular case, I don't think he was trying to hit LeBron in the nuts there. I do think he was trying to hit LeBron though, because I think he was trying to stand up and sort of take a punch at LeBron at the same time, and the sort of hey fuck you, don't disrespect me by walking over me like that. I do think that was like coincidence, accidental that he hit him in the nuts. But it wasn't like he was actually trying to like punch out. I believe that, right? And I kind of side with Chuck here in that like honestly, if you knocked over somebody on the street and you needed to get from point A to point B, and even if you needed to get from point A to point B fast, would you step over the person or would you step around the person? Like you would always step around the person, not just because out of respect or whatever, but because you'd be afraid of hurting yourself by like stepping over the person. You'd be afraid, oh, I might step on him and then like twist an ankle or something like that. You would always go around them. And I think that's true in basketball too. Like there is no plausible reason for stepping over them other than basically saying, yeah, fuck you, take a look at my nuts while I step over you. There's no reason to do that.
We need to bring up the most
not that like justifies Green punching him or anything, but I totally agree with Chuck that that step over thing, complete disrespect. And NBA players do it all the time, and they always do this thing where they stumble and they pretend that that's the only direction they could possibly go. They're like fucking wrestlers coming off the ropes when they get swung into the ropes. They're like, oh, I cannot control my momentum. Oh no. And they step over the person, even though that's what no normal person would ever do in a situation like that. So I totally get it. I totally get being like, fuck you, man, step over me like that. But I don't obviously believe that it justifies punching him in the nuts. I mean,
Yeah,
we can argue
obviously.
back and forth about whether Green is really a villain, but in that particular altercation, come on, LeBron James was being a dick. Let's be honest.
I got to stick with. I don't think he's got a shot of winning. I mean, that's just my personal take. I don't think the voters would give it to him, even though I kind of agree with your take.
Ooh.
But I'd be interesting. I mean, I don't hate that one. Obviously, I stand by LeBron James gets Finals MVP if the Cavs win. There's just nobody else on the team that's going to get that. Iguodala, as I mentioned by my metric, and we can talk this a little in a second, but I want to talk a little more some other stuff in the finals. But I did my back of the napkin metric for Finals MVP in an article this week, and what I want to stress is I don't even necessarily think this is the best metric or the best way, but what I did like is I made a very set criteria for how I was going to do it, so you can understand why I would give it to somebody over somebody else. Right now, by my metric, Andre Iguodala is in the lead. But if Steph Curry has, it basically kind of goes to the winner. Whoever wins the next game. If Curry wins the next game, if Draymond wins the next game, if Iguodala wins the next game, if Clay comes up big and wins the next game, if I were given a vote, I would give it to one of those. So there's still a lot to be decided on who gets to win there.
Mm-hmm. So Dre, you want to get into?
Okay, so actually, one other point that's just been coming up. I don't know if you have this in the script at all, Brian. I forgot to check, but one fascinating part of this finals, it's near and dear to our heart. We've discussed this on the show over and over again, but we have to discuss it again because it's front and center, is Cavaliers fans hating Kevin Love. And, the biggest story right now is where's Kevin Love going to go? What are they going to do in the offseason? And my kind of general problem is I'm proud of Kevin Love. He got the contract, right? I think he's $115 million over 5 years or somewhere near that. Who the heck are you able to trade Kevin Love to that's an upgrade to the team? Mm-hmm. That is also willing to take Kevin Love. Although one here, I'm going to float this by. This is the other popular rumor that's going out there. Kevin Love not to Boston, to Chicago for Jimmy Butler. Wow, that either fell
Dre,
flat
okay.
or it's fascinating.
There's so much to talk about here. So we have a whole segment, Dre, on NBA trades. You want to finish up the finals first before we go into trades?
I want to talk a little bit about. I mean, we can do whatever, but yeah, let's talk Kevin Love and the bashing of him, because it's him missing a game and then winning by 30, and then him coming back and coming off the bench and then them doing worse. It's showing the worst causality out of fans, who don't understand. Why that's possible.
And he's playing with a concussion, right? Like, if this was the NFL with a better concussion protocol, he probably wouldn't even be playing.
Yeah, he's probably playing with a concussion. It's also his first finals. And traditionally... No.
First. He wasn't in. You're right. That's right. Yeah, sorry about that.
And traditionally, players don't generally fare very well. I mean... Did anyone remember James Harden's first finals? They didn't look pretty at all.
Shout out to James Harden, by the way. He was the Shaqtin' a Fool Player of the Year for 2016. So congrats to him.
James Harden was awful in his first finals. It's actually fairly common. Even Curry wasn't really great. He hasn't been in this one either. But he wasn't
was awful his first finals too. That's true.
I mean, there's a lot of that. There's also, again, the same problem that has always plagued them, that they're just not using him in a way that plays to his strengths. He's a great rebounder, he's a great passer, and he's a great shot maker, and he's good at getting to the line, and they don't put the ball in his hands to do any of those things very well. When Cleveland's game resorts to hero ball, and it almost always does when their offense stalls a little bit, then he's not one of the two players that's going to get the ball in order to play hero ball, right? I mean, so yeah, sure. I mean, I guess you could trade him for some other guy who would also stand around doing nothing while Kyrie Irving and LeBron James dominate the ball, but that doesn't make your team any better. I'm sorry, but nobody's going to give you Anthony Davis for Kevin Love. I mean, I don't know what the hell the Cavs want.
I could see Hassan Whiteside, for instance, being an upgrade, but there's no way to make that work. He's a free agent, no restricted free agency rights, no bird rights, so that there's not a way to trade for him unless someone would rather have Kevin Love than Whiteside. And at this point, I don't think that's the case. I do like that you brought up the concussion, because another player actually to bring up is just a very simple comparable is, Kevin Love's comparison from now until forever, Klay Thompson, got a concussion in Game 5 against the Houston Rockets last season. And, he did not play well in the finals at all either. And, we can't necessarily say that's the reason, but, we've talked about this a lot on the show. People underestimate how hard it is to play through injuries or to rehab through injuries or to come back from injuries all the
Well,
time,
yeah,
and it's remarkable.
and especially a concussion is going to impact a lot of things like shooting accuracy and things like that are going to be heavily impacted by a concussion, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's gonna play havoc with your balance and stuff like that. I mean, I mean, I think Cleveland fans are so. I think Cleveland fans and LeBron fans are in huge denial about the nature of their team and their star player. The truth of it is that LeBron James likes to play hero ball. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's always bad because he just so happens to be probably the best player in the history of the NBA in terms of being able to get to the bucket and put the ball in the bucket. But his manner of his style of playing where he wants to completely dominate the ball and constantly sort of probe the defense, get a favorable switch so that he's playing, against the defender he likes, then drive to the basket and then kick out to open shooters or finish. That is the exact type of ball where the only players that make sense as accompaniments to that piece are players who are good defenders and spot up shooters, basically a bunch of 3-and-D guys with emphasis on the D. And pretty much nobody on the Cavs fits that bill because sure they have some shooters, but they don't have that defensive kind of guy. And that's the only kind of player that fits with LeBron James unless you convince LeBron James to play a different style of ball.
So it sounds
which
though
no
like
coach has really ever been able to do. Spoelstra got a little bit more movement out of him, but I mean, he left Miami, and I think it's not just because he wanted to go back to Cleveland, but also because he wanted to be able to play his hero ball style of play.
I was going to say, it sounds like you don't have a problem with my Jimmy Butler note as a possibility.
I think it would be a great trade because right now they're starting J.R. Smith, right? So J.R. Smith to Jimmy Butler is a huge upgrade. Presumably you use Tristan Thompson instead of Kevin Love as a starter. They're both starting now, but I mean in the future you'd start Thompson. You'd probably have a traditional center. I think it'd be a huge upgrade, just because of getting decent players on the floor.
Well, there's going to be all kinds of.
I don't think Butler would be very happy at all playing next to a guy like Kyrie Irving.
No, there's going to be all kinds of Jimmy Butler talk on this show, but let's just say that even though he's not as underrated as he used to be, right? He was an all-star this year, I think. He's still really underrated. He's pretty much the best shooting guard in the league now, and people think, maybe he's okay.
He's a top 10 NBA player.
Yeah. He's still underrated, right, guys? He's really good.
He used to be underrated because we all said he was an all-star and everyone else thought he was a role player. And now he's underrated because everyone thinks he's an all-star and we think he's all NBA.
Right.
I'd agree with that. And I mean, the one rough part, just to kind of finish on the Cavs, is what people don't get, and this finals isn't helping it. The problem is this finals hurts it. 2 years in a row, the finals have basically prevented the Cavs from fixing what's going to keep them, in my opinion, from hitting that next level, which is Kyrie Irving is very much a Kobe-esque player in that he is a good, at least not yet in his career, not great player. And he might turn into it. I don't want to, I hate speaking definitively. We've learned our lesson
young, right?
We've learned our lesson with Russell Westbrook where, at 23, we're like, that's it. He's hit his ceiling. And then at 27, he's like, screw you. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to say that. But thus far, Kyrie Irving isn't there. And last finals, he got injured. So you're not going to be able to trade an injured Kyrie Irving. You just can't trade injured stars for value. And this finals, because he's going off on, as you're pointing out, Brian, on essentially lucky shooting. And I want to get, by the way,
I'll get into that right after you're done, Dre.
Yeah, I was going to say, I want to get a passive-aggressive comment in on that and let you follow up, which is, there was a great set of tweets and articles that you pointed me at that basically used the expected points per shot metric, which said if an average player took the shots that Kyrie and LeBron took last game, they would have made 45% of them. And I think they made, 70 to 80%?
Yeah, let's bring this up. This is from Ben Alamar at ESPN, and he said, he had an 80.4% effective field goal percentage for that game. But considering his shot quality, the average player would have shot 45.5 on those shots. That's not very good.
So I'm hugely behind this analysis, but I want to get a pot shot out at another ESPN entity, which is 538. I was called insane in an article that I wrote about Kobe by Neil Payne, where I basically said if you compare Kobe to an average shooter, here's what the average shooter would have done. So, I like ESPN. You kind of play both sides of the fence, but I like that analysis. The compare to average player and what would you think? So yeah, the problem is you can't expect Kyrie Irving to shoot twice as good as an average player on the same bad shot selection and make them. But because he's doing it in this finals, he's not going to go anywhere. And I think that's just a real, I think the Cavaliers are stuck as long as they've got LeBron and Kyrie, locked in as point guard and, whatever you want to call LeBron, second point guard.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to make a big difference when Green comes back, right?
Yeah.
Draymond.
I mean, a lot of the switches that the Cavs got on a lot of their pick and rolls aren't going to be as favorable for them when Green is on the floor.
So I've got the box score up here now, the popcorn machine box score, which I like. It kind of lines up everything well. And the team stats are incredibly even in everything except shooting. The Warriors actually beat the Cavs in rebounding, with Bogut playing limited minutes due to his injury. And for those who haven't heard yet, he's out for the rest of the finals now. He's got a sprained knee. Yep. So they still beat him in rebounds without him and Green. So if Green comes back and maybe they'll play Ezeli some more minutes, maybe the Cavs would get pounded on the boards instead. But that didn't happen in this game, right? Turnovers were pretty even, assists, all that. Just the shooting was ridiculous, right? 53% versus 36%. We're like, well, maybe there was great offense versus, bad defense or whatever. Well, I don't know. We've got the player tracking up here, right? Dre, your favorite thing on NBA.com.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, we'll post a link for everyone to look at here. But here's some of the nuggets that I pulled out of there just for an example. So Irving and LeBron went a combined 19 for 30 on contested shots. And anyone who watches the game knew that, Irving was taking all these fadeaways and making them. Curry and Barnes, on the other hand, combined for 4 for 17 on uncontested shots. So there is a pretty big luck factor in this game, independent of defense and skill and all that. So, we already showed the stats there about Irving's effective field goal percentage. But just to finish this up, Hero Ball triumphed in this game, right? The Cavs had 15 assists on 43 made baskets, and they still shot 53%. So, I hate saying bad luck, but that's what happened.
You can call it luck, you can call it whatever. It's a freakish coordination of circumstances, right?
It was an incredible display of skill and talent by LeBron and Irving. Like, watching it was amazing.
No one's taking that away from them, but
it's just unexpected.
It's not likely to happen 2 more times.
Yes,
right.
That's what I.
Nor is it likely to happen 2 more times that Klay Thompson can't hit any open shots, right? And then, let's not forget too that when Green comes back, that probably means less of Barnes playing power forward, which has got to be a good thing.
He played center for a little bit in Game 5. How big of a disaster is that? He's the bad rebounder for a small forward.
I thought Barnes was the weakest link on the court. He was pretty terrible. Not just in terms of the shots he was missing, but there were so many situations where a player, made a pass where he wasn't ready to catch the pass, and some of that might be playing out of position. But generally, as a coach, the big pet peeve is if you're not ready to catch the ball, then don't cut to the goddamn basket.
Yeah.
And it's and there were several scenarios where, Barnes just clearly wasn't ready for the pass that he was given.
My last numbers thing on this game is the shot chart. And, for anyone watching on video right here, the Cavs made every single long two practically. There was a couple, but
that's pretty insane. Because when you look at the shot selection, the Warriors look great.
Yep.
They just didn't hit them, right? And
they missed a lot of threes, a lot of shots.
Cleveland's shot selection, and it looks awful. But if you make them all, who cares, right?
Although one thing I will say is, they miss wide open threes. That's bad luck. When all the Warriors smalls are trying to take shots at the rim versus the Cavaliers' real centers, I can see why those are tough shots to make. Inside.
They are. Tristan Thompson is your boy, and let's give him some credit. He's played well, and as I mentioned, he's in a tie for Finals MVP by my vote, and last season he was actually the best player.
Wait. He's not ahead of LeBron James, is he?
I said a tie. So, all right. So we could go
explain
to this
your metric here, Dre.
So my metric, and I do think some people miss this. Basically, it goes as conventional wisdom as you can get within backing it with the data, which is to say, I look at the games that the team wins in the finals. That's all I care about. I've actually got a second metric that I might post at some point called the Jerry West Award, which goes for the best player on the losing team for games that they lost.
Best trade canceled by Jerry West by the franchise? Oh, sorry.
All right. No anger there. But anyway, so basically I say you look at the best player in terms of points over par in the win. So there are four wins in an NBA Finals, of course. So that gives you up to 4 points. And then, if there's a tie, then I give it to whoever had the better overall performance in winning games. So I'm being utterly mean. I'm saying I don't care how you performed in games that you lost, which, you might be able to argue for, because, if a guy wins you 2 games but loses you a game, does he really count? But regardless, I say only look at the best player in games that they won, and then look for who either was responsible for the most wins, as in just total games, and then if there's a tie there, which there were a lot of, then give it to whoever had the better performance. So what I'm saying is, the Cavs have 2 wins. In the first win the Cavs have, Tristan Thompson was the best player on the Cavs in that one. In the last win that the Cavs had, LeBron James was the best player in that. That's a tie. Now, to be fair, comparing those 2 performances, LeBron James's near triple-double is the better game currently.
Yeah.
I can get on board with that, because it's not like it's aggregate goals. Every game is its own thing.
Well, and the other thing that I find, I got some people giving me some flack over, like Shane Battier. What people seem to miss is when you're talking about 4 games in the NBA, 4 individual wins, random players can go off. We actually saw this on the Warriors at the start of the season. So to start the season out, Andre Iguodala was one of, according to our numbers, and by the way, when I say our numbers, I just mean telling you what happened. We said in the first 10 games that have already happened in the book, the player that is most responsible for those wins for the Warriors is Andre Iguodala. And of course, that didn't hold up, right? By the end of the season, obviously, Draymond Green, best power forward in the NBA. Steph Curry, best point guard in the NBA. Andre Iguodala is still a great player, but not an All-NBA. We wouldn't put him All-NBA. And so in the finals, the same thing can happen. Over 4 games, a random player can step up. Mario Ellie can be just as responsible for winning on his team as Tim Duncan, as absurd as that sounds, even though I would never, ever, ever in a million years take Mario Ellie over Tim Duncan. I hope I'm saying his name right, his pronunciation.
It is Mario Ellie. You got it.
So
played for the Albany Patroons in the CBA, Dre, before he came to the Run TMC Warriors with Don Nelson.
I was going to say, Patrick, I would assume that trades are more interesting to you, but I'll let you get final words.
Yeah, no, I'll say this: the best prediction metric you can have is take the winning team, pick its highest scoring player. Boom, done.
Oh, you're saying who the voters will pick?
I think it's obvious that LeBron James is an absolute lock to win Finals MVP if the Cavs win. It's painfully obvious.
What if Irving has another? I
wouldn't even model anything else. Right?
What if Irving has another 40-point game and LeBron is 20?
Well, but LeBron's probably not going to have 20. He's probably going to have 20, 12, and 7. Right? I mean,
it's 90%.
And given his legacy, given him coming back to Cleveland and winning a title, etc., he would have to perform incredibly poorly for him not to win MVP should the Cavs win it all. Right? Now, the exception, I think, to this pick the highest scoring player is when you get to series like last year's where there wasn't a huge discrepancy in points between the highest scoring player and the next 2 or 3. And so Iguodala was kind of ripe to be a spoiler in that sense, in that it's not like the Warriors didn't have a guy who was scoring 27 a game, right? Their scoring was actually fairly evenly distributed.
Actually, Steph Curry scored 26 a game last series.
Did he really? How the hell did he do that? He was terrible in the first 2 games.
He actually got 58.5 true shooting. He regressed. So I'm wicked impressed that they didn't end up giving it to Steph Curry.
That's really, in my memory, Curry had a very, for him, subpar. But maybe that's just 2 games that he was bad. I remember. So part of this was it was game 3 where they were getting blown out, and then Curry scored 24 points in the 4th quarter. He finally got hot again.
Hey, for Curry, that true shooting is crap. I expect at least 64% true shooting.
What seems like what happened was that this seems to have dealt with expectations, which makes sense. In the deciding game, Curry and Iguodala both put up 25 points, and I think the voters went 25 points out of Curry. What are you doing, Curry? Come on, and went 25 points out of Iguodala. Oh my God, look at you. So I think that's. I'm impressed that trick worked, but it seemed to. And, that game, Draymond Green put up a triple-double as well. So I'm shocked as all heck that Iguodala won it, but, I'm fine with it because my numbers actually agreed. They said he was the best player in 2 of their 4 wins.
Yeah.
And he does get credit for being the LeBron stopper, even though LeBron still scores a lot of points.
Well, he definitely got a lot of credit for that on, like, TV. Like, the commentators kept talking about it, right?
Yep.
And obviously, we do show notes. So above the gods in the comment section asked for a link of Ben Alamar's point about the shooting discrepancy. Nerd Numbers put it in the chat. I want to just make sure to give credit. That is Brian. Brian did all the awesome research for that. All right, let's go to unless you've got any more.
Channel Nerd Numbers posting, not Nerd Numbers himself.
Yes, that should be clear. Okay, I want to get to some trade. This is the fun stuff, and we may be jumping the gun. And as we've mentioned, this will be over far too soon. And I'm not as interested in the draft.
Dre, real fast on the MVPs. I think you can't understate how good Shaq and Duncan have been in the finals and just overall. Those guys were amazing, according to your numbers, anyway.
Or Jordan.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, Jordan, what was funny is, same kind
Part of his prime was cut off by the sample size, though.
Yeah.
That's true. But what I was going to say about Jordan, Patrick, is the funny thing is because he was awarded 6 MVPs, I go through and I award him 4, which, the best on the list, right? Of the last 30 years, no one else is close, right? Shaq has the 3 back-to-back, but even one of Shaq's, right, is kind of, in 2001, was just kind of an even shellacking against Philadelphia.
Yeah,
right?
I think we probably both agree that the MVP, the quote-unquote real MVP for Jordan's last 2 titles was probably Rodman.
Well, no, I said that on it. I said basically Rodman, of the last 3 finals MVPs, 1996 goes to Rodman, 1997 goes to Jordan, 1998 goes to Pippen, and that's not, they were a big 3. They were one of the first, not first, they were another one of the legacy of big 3s, after obviously the 1980 Celtics, the Showtime Lakers, they were in the middle there, and Jordan just got credit for all 3, and that's what I said, but I gave him 4, and I what I found funny about that is, you go, when you give Jordan 4 finals MVPs, but previously he had 6, you kind of feel funny because you're kind of docking him, even though to Brian's point, obviously that means he's amazing because he's on this list an amazing number of times.
I'm not a big fan of Doc and Dre, but everything else he said was a good point.
But fair enough.
So, do we want to talk Draymond Green conspiracy theories before we go to trades, or do you guys not care about that?
Warriors
no.
fan?
Okay,
no,
we'll skip that.
On.
Oh, I want to give a shout out to an old article I wrote. I met a guy named Ryan Rodenberg, who's a professor of law at Florida State University. And he actually pointed out that, while there are rules, that you could argue against tampering and stuff like that, there is actually nothing against the NBA having the commissioner give his refs, instructions to basically call more favorably for one team. So ironically, Brian, there is actually nothing illegal about the conspiracy theory. And what I'll say to Draymond Green is I don't actually have any problems with him wanting to extend series. Like I don't see an issue with that. We bring up professional wrestling all the time where they fail at that. But to Patrick's point, I don't really think he's doing anything nefarious.
And Ethan Short-Strauss agrees with you guys. I have a tweet from him here saying the NBA's TV money is already locked in. They don't get any more money for extending the series. Now you can argue TV ratings maybe and things like that, but yeah, it's there's actually I'll show one more article here that kind of supports what you're saying. This was actually on the new Ringer site by Bill Simmons. This is let me give credit here, Jason Concepcion. And then he basically says, probably the reality of things is the world's just disorganized and chaotic. It's not like a conspiracy. That's just a lot more likely.
Yeah, I think it gets very surprising in the real world to see well-orchestrated conspiracies as opposed to just kind of random stuff that happens.
However, Tim Donaghy does think
I want to throw this under the bus because, this guy is just a liar.
He really is.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, this guy has no credibility whatsoever.
I can't remember the book, but I can't remember the title of the book, but it's a fantastic book about that entire story. And what they basically point out is none of the numbers match Tim Donaghy. None of the
Mhm.
numbers
Yeah.
match any of his stories. He wasn't gaming the over under. He was definitely calling it the other way. Gamblers had caught on. You could look at how the spreads changed, and basically the spreads on games that Donaghy was reffing were changing the same levels as like when LeBron James got injured. So, basically the historical past showed that gamblers had caught on to it. So this is just a guy that, he's very psychotic, sociopathic is the word I'm looking for. He's got neighbors that would say, he was very, manipulative and stuff like that. So I give him zero credit. I'll put the link in the post to be nice, Brian, but I'll probably give it with a big line that says, "Take nothing this guy says seriously. He's a
I
liar."
knew I could get you guys talking about this, but no. So here, the general conspiracy that I got just reading the internet overall is basically people say, well, Draymond Green did this kind of minor thing against LeBron James, and he ends up getting suspended for that, but to extend the series, right? Because the Warriors are ahead. But then meanwhile, in the past series, he was doing much worse things, and he didn't get dinged for that because it was a close series. And, it was an accumulation, though, right, of all he had done. And when you put it all together, like, honestly, I kind of thought he should have gotten suspended. Like, he's being kind of ridiculous. Like, just play ball, Draymond Green? Come on, just play ball. So anyway, let's move on to trades.
All right, so the big one, and I think this is going to make a major difference, and I'm curious if it happens, is, we already started teasing it, Jimmy Butler. Because some big names are Boston and Minnesota are showing up in trade talks for Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Butler on either one of those teams does pretty much put them over the edge. Patrick, are you willing to put up with optimism on the Wolves again? We do this to you every year.
I tell you what, I'm already optimistic about the Wolves. Damn them, because I agree with Arturo that Karl Anthony Towns is probably already the best center in the NBA.
Ooh, I love it.
Because if you look at his rookie season, which was obviously historic, and then you look at the ways that players traditionally improve from their first season to their second, like, the reduction in fouls and turnovers and things like that. I mean, he's a monster. He is going to be a monster. And so that's going to make them, it's going to give them that sort of baseline success. It'll be very much like with Garnett and then later with Love, like, if you can put anybody next to them that can play, they'll be fine. Now, that is the problem. Right now, that club has exactly two functional NBA players, and I don't care what you think about Andrew Wiggins and his potential. He is not yet a starting caliber NBA player. So, I mean, it's always possible that they don't put anyone next to those two that can play, but...
Jeez, I'm looking at Brian doesn't have the numbers up, but obviously the 2016 NBA Timberwolves, when Kevin Garnett and Andre Miller comprise your fourth and fifth above average players on your, to your point, Patrick, I assume you're talking Ricky Rubio and Gorgie Jang. First off, Gorgie Jang, am I mistaken? It seems like he's had injury issues, or he had all 82 games, but I thought there were some concerns there.
I don't know that there's any concerns. I mean, the big concern with him is that he's just not a very good power forward, and he's obviously not a stretch four. So, if you play both him and Karl Anthony Towns, you kind of have to play sort of an old school type of ball. Now, I personally don't think this is a big problem because
Towns can stretch the floor, right?
Despite the fact that Towns is 7 feet tall, he's actually incredibly good at defending smaller players when he switches on the perimeter. Like, it's really really good. You can watch, for example, the Timberwolves. A lot of the highlights when the Timberwolves beat the Warriors towards the end of the season was watching Steph Curry play against Karl Anthony Towns after a switch, and his footwork is really amazing.
Well, so remember, he won the skills challenge too. That's right. Freaking remarkable.
And then there's the fact that more than likely, I suspect that Thibodeau is going to actually encourage and allow Towns to shoot more threes because he's good at it. Whereas Sam Mitchell, I mean, that was some crazy. That was some very get off my yard level craziness last year, and so I personally don't think it's a big problem to run the two together. But I think, most coaches in the NBA would prefer to have a small ball power forward next to Karl Anthony Towns. But their real problem is that Zach LaVine, who's the point guard and/or shooting guard of the future, is so far a terrible NBA player, right? And everyone has all these like optimistic thoughts that he might become good, but
What's the deal with I mean,
who
Rubio
knows?
managed to get 76 games last season, so what's the deal with him? I mean, I
He's
love
good.
Rubio.
He should have been an all-star last year.
Rubio is, in my opinion, an all-star. People concentrate very much on the fact that he is not a good shooter. I mean, people love to just talk about the one thing you can't do, even if you're really good at a bunch of other things. I do think it does matter, though, that since Rubio is not a good shooter, you have to surround him with players that are good shooters. And, Zach LaVine was okay as a stand-up shooter. Wiggins is not. Wiggins has so far been a terrible and unreliable shooter. Dang and Towns don't yet kind of have 3 point, or Towns actually does, even though they didn't let him. Dang doesn't have 3 point range. And then a lot of the players coming off their bench, there's just nobody there that can fucking shoot.
And let me just state the obvious, guys. If the Bulls call you and say, "Hey, we want Wiggins for Jimmy Butler," you do it 8 days a week, right? Like we were saying, Jimmy Butler is an All NBA player, and Arturo, speaking of him, was agreeing with you guys on Twitter today. He was going off on people, and I've got this chart he posted up right here.
If they want Wiggins,
but no, all I was going to finish off with is that he posted a chart saying that Wiggins' career arc so far compares with Rudy Gay. So there you go on Wiggins.
I think that's actually a pretty realistic estimate, by the way.
Yeah.
By the way, I hate to jump onto the get off my lawn territory, but I do hate the similarity of like this player looks like this player, and this was their career because there's so much there. But and what I will jump.
He's saying his stats compare to Rudy Gay's stats.
So here's the thing about Wiggins is that he has not yet developed a great NBA offensive game, although he's very good at some very specific things. Like he's a pretty reasonable post-up player, and for the first like 15 games of last season, he feasted there until NBA defenses were like, oh yeah, okay, this guy can post up. We should play him accordingly. And then suddenly it wasn't such a weapon for him because he's not a very good passer out of the post. And that's where the problem with Wiggins is that beyond that offense, he does not do anything else well, right? If you look at Butler, he does a whole bunch of non-offensive things very well. He's a great rebounder. He gets a lot of steals. He's low on fouls. He passes the ball well. Doesn't turn the ball over.
He was shooting
all of those
2 seasons ago. I really wonder the putting Derrick Rose back in, how that might.
But, shooting efficiency is one of the things that is most subject to variance. So if that's the thing you do well, you have to do it really well, right? If that's your only thing, if that's the only thing you do really well, then you need to do it really, really, really fucking well, right? But if you're just sort of above average at it and it's your only skill, there's guys like that a dime a dozen in the NBA, right? And Wiggins is not good at any of those metrics, right? He's not a good rebounder. Doesn't get steals. He's not a good passer.
He's decent at offensive rebounds, but he's bad at defensive. And this was like I call this the Carmelo Anthony trick. You look at Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James. Carmelo Anthony, above average offensive rebounds. LeBron James, below average offensive rebounds. Well, what's the secret sauce? Carmelo Anthony misses more shots, so he's got more offensive rebound opportunities. LeBron James just makes the shot in the first try.
Yeah, there's some of that. And so, I mean, and the big thing that gets me about Wiggins is that he's a terrible passer, and it's not execution, it's vision. He has no vision at all. If you watch Timberwolves games, you'll see and they try to play through him a lot, right? And he'll try to go to the basket. He has absolutely no vision for recognizing when the help defender has moved and when there's an opening for him to make a play by passing to a teammate. Like he just can't make that simple pass. And that's to me, as an NBA coach, that would be very frightening to me because that seems to be the kind of thing that isn't going to get a lot better people seem to think that things like floor vision will improve with time, but it's very rare because a lot of it has to do with ball handling and stuff like that. Players like Steph Curry who go from being poor/mediocre ball handlers to great ball handlers are extreme rarities in the NBA. Most of the time, good ball handlers were always good. They were good in college and they're good in the NBA. They get like a little more sure about turnovers and stuff, but guys who just really don't know how to put the ball on the floor very well generally don't get a lot better at that skill. And if they do, they get better in a way that like they learn specific ways to put the ball on the floor with one or two dribbles and get to a spot and shoot. They don't become primary ball handlers. So, I mean, I love Wiggins' athleticism, but he does not look like somebody who's going to be anywhere near the level of Jimmy Butler when he gets better. So
And
far,
so one,
it could
one note,
it could always surprise us, but
yeah,
that's not the way he looks to me.
I was going to say, I may write this, I may not, time, whatever. But I was looking at Kevin Love, and as I mentioned, the two major comparisons for Kevin Love are Andrew Wiggins and Klay Thompson. He's just going to be compared with those players forever. And people that think the Cavaliers would have been better off with Andrew Wiggins instead of Kevin Love, they're out of there. Like that one, I threw it out. The Klay Thompson one is freaking fascinating, and the real story is the Kevin Love trade to the Warriors makes sense if you believe that the Warriors knew that, sixth man, 1,700 minutes, good Draymond Green. Draymond Green was going to turn into the best power forward and like best, can play 3 to the 5 player in the NBA, which I don't buy. But Andrew Wiggins is just anybody that thinks he's anything special is off their rocker. So we already agree there. And, this is our classic thing. Why would you ever keep a player that you think might be a star in 2 years when you can get a star now? The other kind of location that we think might happen for has come up is the Celtics. The Celtics have that number 3 pick, and I think that could be amazing. I think if Jimmy Butler ends up on the Celtics, that could on its own be something.
It depends on what the Bulls want, I guess. I mean, I'm assuming they want to rebuild, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, the Celtics have a multitude of things that they can, as long as they don't give up the farm, they have so much that they can hold on to. I actually want to look this up really quick. We love Jay Crowder. Still can't believe, Mark Cuban, that you gave up Jay Crowder, who Mark Cuban at one point on an NBA telecast said the wages of wins people. I think one of the reasons was James Riccotto, who I believe now actually works for the Mavericks, wrote a really stellar review of Jay Crowder at the time. And, he plugged them, and then they gave up Jay Crowder, which, maybe the Celtics were refusing to bite unless Jay Crowder was included, but I don't buy that was the case. But, they got Jay Crowder.
Got traded, he was a bit player who wasn't getting a ton of minutes.
Yeah, he hadn't quite emerged yet. But they did get, who is it, Dwight Powell back, right? Had been really good for the Mavericks. So it wasn't a terrible trade for them.
Well, I mean, if Rondo had worked out, it wouldn't have been a terrible.
Exactly.
It's kind of sucky that Rondo clashed. But, we've got Amir Johnson, Evan Turner, Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, all playing really well. Jared Sullinger playing all right. So, as long as they keep, I'd say 4 or 5 of those and add Jimmy Butler to the mix, I think they're fine.
I would agree. Yeah. I mean, Butler would take, I'm assuming, Avery Bradley's spot, right? Which would be a huge upgrade.
Yeah, and so and that's Jimmy Butler. If you've got a starting 5 of what Isaiah Thomas, Jimmy Butler, Jay Crowder, Amir Johnson, Jared Sullinger, and then you have Evan Turner as your 6th man. I mean, there you go. Yeah. Or Amir Johnson as, I don't know. You could try and kind of play a little bigger if you're willing to play Jay Crowder. It looks like they've already been playing Jay Crowder as a power forward. So, I think Jimmy Butler is going to potentially change. At least he's going to upgrade at least one team, and I hope it happens. That's if we think it happens. I haven't been following closely enough to know, but I know he was unhappy in Chicago last season, and the Bulls do seem, with all their injury, with Derrick Rose, with Noah, with the fact that Pau Gasol is old, I don't know. If they're stupid enough to pull the rebuilding switch and think that they need to blow it up, that could really change the fortunes of it.
And Noah's gone too, apparently.
Yep.
But you mean like they're shopping him, or what do you mean?
Well, I guess it's known that he's not coming back for whatever reason. I think he's a free agent even. I'm not
sure. Is he a free agent?
I'm not sure. But either way, yeah, I feel like I read that. We'll try to get some verification.
I mean, yeah.
Well, because look at his perspective. Like, he was an all-star and then he got benched, so why would he want to come back there? He's a little bit old, but he's still not bad.
There was a game last season where Noah was supposed to start, and at the last second, he got moved to the bench and then was unexpectedly scratched. And he said it was with an unknown injury. And he was right back in the lineup the next game. And I remember watching that. And my theory at the time was that basically Noah got unexpectedly moved to the bench and said, I'm not going to play today if you're going to do that.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, he's done after the season. His contract's up, and, they have his bird rights, but, if he doesn't want to sign with them, they either have to trade him or he just signs somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know what their books look like, but obviously their best case scenario is to keep Butler and keep building around him. I mean, their real problem has always been and will continue to be Derrick Rose.
And apparently they are trying to shop him too.
Yeah, but who would want that? I mean, who wants a guy who's effectively worth a backup point guard type deal, but he costs
At
17
best.
million? He's
21,
like
by the way, Patrick. 21 million next season.
so 21 million, and he's only as good as a backup, but he probably wants to start. And I mean, like it's all just this big gamble that oh yeah, 3 or 4 knee surgeries or however many he's had, he's gonna magically get better.
Let's
And
take
it's
some
like,
guesses. Lakers, Sacramento Kings, teams like that.
I don't think anyone's really stupid enough to bet on Rose big time right now, right? I think
Even if they were, when it would happen would be at the trade deadline, where they think he's the missing piece. And what would have to have happened for that to be the case is Derrick Rose would have to play at least somewhat reasonably for the first 50 games of the season, and then a team trades a very, very little for him if they think that he would help them in the playoffs and the Bulls aren't in the playoff run. So there's no
I
way
honestly think the only way you get rid of Derrick Rose right now is to buy him out or to pay somebody to take him.
and there's no reason to do that because his
Yeah.
contract's up after the season.
Yeah, no, I mean, if I'm Chicago, I would just do my best to compete this year, right? You keep Butler, you try to bring back Noah, but if you can't, then you try to find somebody else who's a little bit underpriced for a year. You try to be like a 40-45 win team this year. Then when Rose's contract goes off the book, you say thanks, but no thanks, and then you shop for the big deals, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And so, I mean, I would put Jimmy Butler in the Andre Drummond scenario, which is Andre Drummond is a restricted free agent this season, and in theory, some teams can go after him. But the way this should work out is one of two ways: either Detroit just offers him the max and he comes back, or Detroit says, "Hey, here's a little less than the max." Another team offers him the max, and Detroit matches immediately and says, "We had to try. You know that, right, Drummond?" And Drummond says, "Ha ha, I know," and he's back. So there's no way Drummond leaves the Pistons unless they do something really, really stupid. And I'm in the same boat with Butler. I think despite all of the talk around it, and it's possible as agents doing it, let's be clear that NBA players aren't really allowed to move as soon as they've signed into a big deal. And I don't know, Jimmy Butler's on for another couple of years. His contract goes through 2020. So if he wants off the Bulls, the only way he gets out of the Bulls is if they let him off. And one of the things that players traditionally do is they have their agents spread rumors that they want off the team. So I think that's the situation we might be in there. But my personal take on that is Bulls should just keep him.
I mean, I keep hearing rumors about Thibodeau, like basically wanting to get every ex-Bull that there is. I hope they aren't true, because I hope one of the reasons Thibodeau wanted the terms of the Minnesota job in the first place is just so that he could actually craft the team he wants, rather than the team that management in Chicago gave him.
What about a 55-year-old Luol Deng? You could bring him on down to Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate Deng as a.
Oh, I don't either. I'm
comes
joking.
off the bench or anything, but I mean, he's clearly way past his prime. Like, I mean, you just the real thing is they're paying Kevin Garnett like $8 million a year just out of gratuity or thankfulness or whatever.
Well, he's a part owner there now, so he's kind of like paying himself $8 million.
Well, he isn't a part owner because you legally can't be when you're a player, right?
Oh, interesting. That's just a rumor then, or?
Well, yeah, people say that he'll eventually be on the ownership track, but I'm fairly certain anything written down would be illegal.
Which has never happened before with Kevin Garnett and the Timberwolves.
Or the Timberwolves, right? Yeah, clearly. But I mean, Thibodeau hasn't made any moves yet other than to essentially fire all the old assistants and everything, right? Which I think is fairly standard practice, and frankly, given how terrible the coaching was for the Timberwolves, not in terms of wins and losses, but in terms of like the direction they were, the sort of the player development attitudes they had, I think that's justified, right? I mean, when you're a bad team, you can take two approaches. You can try to teach your players to play the right way, and not care about wins and losses, but care about player development. Or you can do whatever the fuck Sam Mitchell was doing, where you play like some weird-ass ancient NBA offensive system that no one plays anymore in the NBA, thus essentially wasting an entire year of player development. And I think it's perfectly justified for the new coach to say, yeah, sorry, not really interested in any of the assistant coaches that helped with that bullshit. So why don't y'all move on and I'll hire my own people.
Well, you guys will be happy to hear, according to Chad Ford and Mark Stein of ESPN, of course, supposedly it's just a lot of outside interest in Jimmy Butler. The Bulls are not actually trying to shop him.
Well,
and
that
it
makes
could,
sense, right?
yeah, and his agent could be
The
stoking.
rumor, yeah, the agent rumor is the one. So maybe Jimmy Butler's not happy with the Bulls, but it
I
appears
don't
the
know.
Bulls are very happy
If
with him.
Wiggins and number 5 can get it done, like,
Done.
in fact, I'm
Yeah.
sure they have already made an offer like that, and I suspect that they've said no. Like, it probably should take more than that to get him. So I wouldn't be. I mean, I don't really know if I wouldn't even be surprised if there's a deal out there that says you can have Jimmy Butler if you take Jerry Rose.
Oh, that's a brutal cap move.
I would, nah, that's not. I mean, if you're the Bulls, that's not worth it. Just especially one of the advantages the Bulls
Depends
have.
on what you get, right? If someone
Yeah.
came to me and offered me a young player, 2 first-round draft picks, and some other stuff, and I got to get rid of Derrick Rose, then I might think about it.
I want to finish this up. Okay, so Patrick, you're the GM of the Bulls.
Yeah.
What is the minimum offer you can tell me any team, but you have to give me an example, concrete. Like it has to be a legitimate package, not hypothetical. What is a legitimate package you would trade away Derrick Rose and Jimmy Butler within reason? Because obviously,
So I mean, it has to be between the two of them, it has to be something worth $35 million, right?
Yep.
Or
Bring up the trade machine.
So I don't know off the top of my head like if another team is under the cap. And here's an interesting tidbit. Pretty much every team is under the cap this year. So
Yep.
in theory, the other team doesn't have to give back as much, right?
Yep.
So I mean, I don't know who all is being shopped or what, but if I could get back,
If you're Thibodeau and you want those players on the Timberwolves,
if I am Thibodeau, I offer them every single player on my roster other than Towns and Rubio. Heck, actually, I would maybe, depending on the offer, I would throw in Rubio. Towns is untouchable, but like if I get to keep two of Towns, Rubio, and Deng, then I make it no matter what they want. I would say.
maybe something like Deng and Levine they might want with some picks. I don't know.
Good God, if they wanted that, I'd be like doing the.
Yeah. Yeah, we're talking about real value versus
Much as I
perceived
think
value.
Wiggins is overrated, I think Levine is more overrated. So,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, I mean, and I mean Butler's probably. I'm gonna assume Butler's gonna play the 2 guard, right? Which is where they had nobody last year. I mean, at one point they were starting Tayshaun Prince at the 2 guard.
Let's give some more credit to the Celtics, though. It looks like they're shopping their pick no matter what, not just for Jimmy Butler. So they know, like, if they can get one star to go on
Yeah, they
with,
want to make the leap, right? And,
yeah,
I mean,
they know that rookies aren't going to get it done for them.
but the problem is there aren't any like marquee players I think available where.
On teams willing to trade them, right?
Well, I mean, to get a marquee player, the team that is trading the marquee player usually wants to rebuild, right?
Yep.
So I mean, like, I don't know, a package for Jimmy Butler, you'd have to give me a fuckload of picks, right? If I really decided to do the rebuilding, if I really wanted to go nuclear in Chicago, and you want Jimmy Butler, then I basically say, I want Jay Crowder, Marcus Smart, and 3 first-round draft picks. And which is like, and that's might not even be enough money, so you might have to throw in another player there too,
It's like
right?
the Chris Webber trade.
Yeah, I mean,
But I mean, what I'm very excited about in this offseason is hopefully we'll see some cool stuff. I mean, this is every offseason, right? It's very much like final throwback to Game of Thrones, the last episode of Game of Thrones, where going into that episode there was so much hype on the internet about what could happen, and then it didn't live up to the hype because unfortunately the imaginations of all of these Game of Thrones fans on the web far exceeded anything that they were able to put on the show. Same kind of way in the offseason. There's so many cool trades, so many cool things that could happen to make the Celtics better, to make the Wolves better, to make the Golden State Warriors better, and we're just going to have to wait and see. I want to throw our last trade out there, and then we can wrap up the show. This seems pretty obvious and seems fine. Philadelphia apparently Between Okafor and Noel, seems more interested in keeping Noel, is what you're saying, Brian, from the articles you've read. And
Philly.com.
it seems to make sense. I mean, Okafor did not play well his rookie season. It's kind of follows what we've said forever. High prospects don't necessarily always pan out. I think he was in a horrible situation. I can't think of a worse team to kind of try and teach someone their rookie season than Philly last season, except maybe the Wolves. So the question's going to be, I think it's kind of like a used car. Does anybody really want to take Okafor? I think it's like, you drive the new car off the lot and it loses half its value. I think one season in Philly, Okafor is no longer worth a top 3 pick. I think the Celtics' top 3 pick is worth more than Okafor at this point. But we'll see if Philly can get anything for him.
I would agree. I think people always tend to value the potential of the current draft class over like the potential of some guy that they've already seen. You know what I mean?
Both of them have been hurt.
Yeah. I mean, a guy like Simmons, like his potential is just magical to everyone, right? Obviously, Okafor has potential too, but since you've already seen him play, the potential seems to be at some lower imaginary ceiling than because when people are evaluating a player that has never played an NBA game, their imagination of potential is always the maximum, right? It's always the ceiling. It's never the low part it's never the range. But then once you've seen Jahlil Okafor play for a whole year, now your evaluation of his potential is the range of what's the worst he could be to what's the best he could be. It's that whole range. But Ben Simmons, no, his potential is just the top of that range. It's just that. There's no bottom.
Oh, and speaking of Simmons, Dre, I liked your tweet. I think it was you about his workouts. Did you? Maybe that was someone else.
What I noted is so last thing, I guess, Ben Simmons is, I guess, saying he's refusing to work out for any teams. And some people are speculating, and this seems fine to me, that this may be a power play to try and end up on the Lakers instead of ending up on the 76ers. And my personal take is he's doing it right, and it's the other way. I've harped against this, and maybe we'll talk more if we do any draft posts. But I've harped against how teams want these, single workouts or combines or really small sample things that they think is going to give them data. And I feel it's just a small sample interview that's going to potentially lead them the wrong way. So I'm on Simmons' side where he's saying the only thing that can happen, he already learned his lesson from going to college, ironically. The only thing that can happen is people's opinions get worse, right? They ask him to do a vertical and he doesn't jump high enough, or they ask him to run and he doesn't run fast enough, or they ask him to take some shots and he's having an off day. All he can do is hurt his draft stock. And the best case scenario is if the 76ers decide, well, screw you, we don't want you as a result, he ends up on the Lakers, which I think he'd prefer and I think would be better for all parties involved. So that's all I got there.
Yeah.
The only thing I have on the 76ers is Embiid is the most interesting out of all those big men to me, just because of how huge he is. Like, maybe Boban is bigger, but I think he's maybe the second biggest player in the NBA. So I'm interested to see how Embiid does.
All right.
That's it.
Well. Anyway, I think that's our show. I think that we got everything. We'll have one more week of NBA playoffs or Game of Thrones next week. A Battle of the Bastards should hopefully win. I would hope, but we'll see. It will be the end of the finals. I didn't really think about any shout outs for this week. So if either of you have any, we'll do that and then we'll end the show.
I have a shout out.
Excellent.
My shout out is to it's not to a person, it's to a meme. My shout out is to the haters gonna say it's fake meme, which has been an awesome meme that has been going around on Twitter and Instagram, etc. lately, where people, how you see like Kobe jumping over a car or whatever, the things that are sort of obviously fake, and then sometimes you see a guy shooting a half-court shot, and it's like then people say it's fake. Well, the haters gonna say it's fake meme is all these people making these videos where it's obviously edited and fake. You see an entire like team of like 13-year-old girls making the same half-court shot, etc., edited together, and it's pretty awesome actually. A lot of this stuff is just absolutely hilarious. So just Google that. You're in for a lot of really funny videos.
We're showing the Deadspin compilation right now. And yeah, I'm with you, Patrick. That's a good shout out.
Anything out of you, Brian?
Yeah, sure. I'll give it a shout out to the San Jose Sharks. They went down to the Penguins in the NHL Finals, but they made their first finals ever. So, good job, Sharks. As my friend pointed out, they let Train sing the national anthem in Game 6, and they deserved to lose because of that. So maybe that was their downfall in the end. But yeah, good job, Sharks. And of course, we've got all kinds of soccer going on right now, not just in Europe, but we've got Copa America right now. USA plays Ecuador tomorrow night during the NBA Finals, so I won't be watching it, but go USA in soccer.
Is that tomorrow night?
I believe it's during the NBA Finals, yeah.
Fuck. Well, that sucks.
We'll have to DVR it, right, Patrick?
Actually, you know what? I actually thought it was tonight.
Oh, maybe I got it wrong. Anyway, those are all my shout-outs, Dre.
Wait, are they playing right now and I'm missing it?
All right, well, anyway,
end the
That's
show.
tomorrow at 6:30.
Okay.
That's going to be rough. Oh, man, that's a terrible conflict.
Just DVR it and don't look at Twitter, and you'll be fine.
Plus, tomorrow, Germany is playing Poland in the Euro Cup at like noon. That'll be a huge game.
Shout out to Messi for dribbling between the goalie's legs too. That was awesome.
All right.
Did you guys see that Boateng save in Germany's last game?
That was the best play ever. Okay, sorry, Dre. Go ahead.
As the non-soccer fan on the podcast, this has taken a very dark turn for me, but I'm glad I'm glad soccer fans are excited. That has been showing up on my Twitter feed. So tomorrow night, enjoy some soccer, enjoy some NBA Finals, enjoy Game of Thrones this weekend, and we will see you next week. This has been the Boxscore Geeks show. If you found us not through our website, we are at boxscoregeeks.com. You can find the show on iTunes and Stitcher as the Boxscore Geeks show. Subscribe, upvote, helps us out. You can follow myself, Nerd Numbers, Patrick Mitten, NBA Geek, or Brian Foster, Boxscore Brian on Twitter to know when we're going live. Typically, it's 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday or Wednesday. As I said, follow us. You have to know, our schedules are busy, so you'll have to see that. You missed the live show on twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers. You can catch the recaps on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. With that said, have a good week, and we'll see you next time.